I'm Elaine Jagelski. Another reason that you might be experiencing anxiety is because you're giving your mind a job that it was not designed for. Your human mind is great at analyzing, at restructuring, reorganizing, reusing. It can do all of those things. But if you're expecting it, wanting it to figure out how, something new, something different, that's not its job. And so it can create a lot of anxiety to just be recycling the same old stuff, especially if you didn't enjoy the way you did the same old stuff. And so you're thinking, oh, but that's too much time, that's too much effort, that's too much money, I don't have that right now. And so then the anxiety builds, and there's this energy, and you don't know what to do with it, and it just sort of cycles around. Now, your higher self or your higher mind is the interpreter of your soul energy. And so it conceives. It is the part of you that comes up with something new, something different, provides inspirations, those little nudges, urges. And your brain and your heart are the receivers for that. Your human mind is then it perceives. It can analyze what happened, and it can tell you about that. But when you expect it to tell you how something could happen or could occur, it's not designed for that. And so, as was mentioned, that can create anxiety, it can create more stress. And so the best way to work with that, so when you're in the anxiety, is there's a simple technique to break the loop. And as in part one, and as in this, the hacks or the techniques, these are just quickies to break in order to reset. Because then you can go on to a technique that is going to address it more fully. But this is just to give you that initial get out of the loop of that feeling and continuing to spiral with it. And the technique is called the physiological sigh. And so with that, what you would do is you would take a deep diaphragmatic breath, right? So it's like really expanding that rib cage. And then as far as the chest is concerned, you want to feel no or hardly any movement. A lot of chest movement is associated with shallow breathing or stress-related breathing. And so you want to stop that on a physiological level. So you take that nice deep breath, and then there'll be a little chest movement because you're going to take a little fill up. So even though it feels like it's full, you're going to take an extra sip of air. And then you're going to exhale on an audible sigh, moan, tone, ujjayi breath, if you're familiar with it. And try to make the exhalation longer than it did to take the inhalation. So it looks something like, I'll do a quick version, something like, right? So spending longer on the exhalation than it took to do the inhalation. So it's a full breath, a sip of air, and then an audible exhalation. About 3 times. Now, the physiological sigh has a number of benefits, but one of the aspects of it is to reset, to allow you to potentially reset the nervous system. And then, as was mentioned, go on to another technique, something like tapping or havening or a number of other ones. And I'll put some links in regard to, I happen to have a video podcast series, and one relates to tapping, one relates to havening. There's also tons of other information about those techniques which you can follow up on, as they can be very assistive. And so it's your higher mind, your higher self, that comes up with the new and the different. And the best way to align with that part of you is to get into the best feeling space possible. And so that doesn't necessarily mean that, immediately you're going to feel good or joyful, but relative to where you are, try to feel what's better than that. And so wanting to get into that alignment. So to break the loop, another technique is that physiological sigh. Give your mind a break, right? Thank it for the great job it's done to analyze and recycle and then let it take a rest from that because it's not its job, and then attune to the higher mind.